What up, Wizards? It's Dev and Igby. He's been with me all week. Only fitting he should join me for what appears to be the last day of Final Fantasy Mtg previews. Do you get it, by the way? There were 16 total days of previews. There are 16 Final Fantasy games. They're very clever at the way they did that. They should do longer preview seasons more often, though. In case you're new around here, longer preview seasons used to be a thing. They'd be like 2 weeks or more long. Now, they're like a week usually, and that is way too many cards every single day to actually keep track of for most people, myself included, in terms of my mental health and sanity, so, and my sleep schedule and blah blah. So I've kind of enjoyed this longer preview season where we only get like 15 cards a day or something, and today we kind of got even less. Today was supposed to be the last day of previews, and we only ended up with 3 cards. But that said, we still haven't necessarily covered yesterday's cards on the channel either. We covered yesterday's cards in the speed run, but I understand that not everybody watches a 4.5-hour video on YouTube. So just in case you're not going to watch that, then I might as well talk about the cards from yesterday today. And it's good that I get to talk about those cards again, because it means I get to kind of issue corrections when needed, and that may be the case for this first card. Now, I want to start the day with Vincent's Limit Break to clear some stuff up. We figured it out, guys. Over the last 24 hours, I think we nailed it down. There was some confusion about this card on the internet yesterday for good reason. It's a confusing Magic card, but it wasn't just the internet as a whole. It also affected my little speedrun stream, where I may be in the basket of people whose brains this card broke. So reading the card is supposed to explain the card, but this one can be a bit of a toughie. I think the key is understanding when the quoted phrase begins and ends. So let's read Vincent's Limit Break again together. 2 mana, 1 and a black for an instant with tiered. Until end of turn, target creature you control gains, quote, when this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control, unquote, and has the chosen base power and toughness. For 0 extra mana, you get Galleon Beast. The creature becomes a 3/2 base power. You get Death Gigas at 1 mana. That's 3 total mana, and you get a 5/2 out of that deal. Hellmasker is 3 extra mana, so 5 total mana, and you get a 7/2. So what this appears to actually do is alter the creature's power and toughness right then and there until end of turn, and also give it the ability to return to the battlefield when it dies. But it won't have that base power when it comes back, which I guess makes sense when you really think about the rules. Cards can't usually move between zones and remember what card they were to begin with, right? There's a whole thing about that. So what this actually does is mostly make a creature trade in combat, either on attacks or blocks. So it costs a little extra mana than the usual black effect that does this would cost, right? We've seen a lot of this effect over Magic's history at this point, and this costs double what it normally would, and sometimes triple or pentuple what it normally would. But so I guess sometimes you'll be happy to do it, and there's some cool setups with it. If you have enough mana to make, say, Heartfire Hero a 7/2 before it dies, well, it's going to do a lot more damage when it does croak. So, you know, there's some decent stuff about this, but I don't think it necessarily shows up anywhere in Standard, but it is a cool version of this effect. But speaking of limit breaks, let's check out Tifas here. A single green mana for an instant with tiered. Somersault is 0 extra mana. The creature gets +2/+2 till end of turn. With Meteor Strikes, you have to pay 2 extra mana, so total of 3 here to double a creature's PT till end of turn. And Final Heaven costs 7 mana, so we're paying 8 for this thing if we want to triple a creature's power and toughness till end of turn. I guess if you got the mana laying around, you might as well spend it. You know, you got them, smoke them, but I'm not sure that the card's going to do that a lot of the time, unless I'm just way off or something. There's a way to cheat Final Heaven, but if you can cheat at like an 8 mana instant, then I think you can probably do better things than play Tifas Limit Break. So I think this is mostly going to be a choice between the first 2 tiers on this. And I actually think they're okay, you know, in like a Gruul Mice deck, just 1 green mana for +2/+2 would not be worth playing, because there's a lot of better options for pump spells. But once you add in Meteor Strikes, I think things get kind of interesting here. For just 3 mana, doubling, say, an Emberheart Champion's power and toughness. It's gotten Prowess a couple times that turn. Maybe you've Monstrous Raged it. I don't want to do the math on that. I guess if you have a Cacophony Scamp or something, and you Monstrous Rage that, and then double its power and toughness, I think you're doing like 16 damage if it got in unblocked, and then you sacrifice it. So again, there's a lot of like ridiculous setups with this in Gruul Mice, so it might have a chance. Side quest card collection is kind of the joke card of the day. They really went somewhere with this one, y'all. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for an enchantment. When it enters, draw 3, discard 2. At the beginning of your end step, if 8 or more cards are in your yard, transform this enchantment, and you get, wait for it, Magic card. I have to pronounce that very carefully. Magic card. 4/4 artifact vehicle with flying and crew 1. So it's obviously a Magic card. And that's basically all it is. Yep. That's a magic card. I guess the best thing about this is the ETB trigger again. As I said on stream yesterday, you could bounce this back to your hand with like pixies and cards like that, but I think it's just way too much mana for the most part. It gives you some graveyard, shenanigans stuff going on, I guess. Draw 3 is an awful lot, but you're kind of not really doing anything that turn when you cast this, and eventually I guess you get a 4/4 flyer. I guess. It's not even a 4/4 flyer. You got to crew it. So I'm just not super excited about the function of the card, but it is a magic card. It is that. Now, the final uncommon from yesterday was Exdeath Void Warlock. This is 3 mana, 1 a black and a green for a 3/3 legendary spirit Warlock. When it enters, you gain 3. At the beginning of your end step, if there are 6 or more permanent cards in your yard, transform Exdeath into Neo Exdeath. This is a star 3 legendary spirit avatar with trample. Neo Exdeath's power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. That is not half bad. It's really not. I wish that it gave you some kind of mill along the way or something. It wants to be in these Lurgoyf decks with all the stuff that we have, Cruel Somnophage and Souls of the Lost and Urborg Lurgoyf. And honestly, it fixes a problem those decks tend to have, right? Those decks have to play lands, and those don't count towards most of your, Lurgoyf's power levels and stuff. But this will count lands, it'll count planeswalkers, enchantments, artifacts, like whatever you got in your deck, so long as it's not an instant or sorcery. This basically counts towards the power. And it has trample, which fixes a lot of the problems with those decks. There's some weird ways to win with those decks in the last couple of years where you have to engineer a way to get trample on your guys, and it's usually not pretty or fun to play. But in this case, you just get built-in trample on one of these 20 power dudes, and that could actually be halfway all right. But moving into the rares, we saw Genji Glove yesterday at some point. 5 mana for an equipment that equips for 3. Equipped creature has double strike. Whenever equipped creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap it. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase, so I guess it probably goes in Ishin 2 Heavens as 1. And I'm not really sure what else. There's a few decks in Commander that like these effects, right? And plenty of aggro decks love them. And I do like that this is one of the first effects like this that any deck can play. I'm not sure it is the first, but it very well may be. So, usually this is the domain of red, but this opens it up to being able to do this in your mono blue deck if that's what you absolutely want to do. And you might want to, because, there's plenty of effects in blue that draw cards when your creatures hit, right? So there's fun ways to use this that I think opens it up to decks that haven't really gotten access to it before. And that might be something. But a more exciting equipment to my mind, maybe not as good of a reference in some ways as Genji Glove, but we also saw Excalibur II yesterday. A single mana for a legendary equipment that equips for 3. Whenever you gain life, it gets a charge counter. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each charge counter on Excalibur II. So that's actually pretty dang good, I would say. I'm not sure if it's standard playable because it's an equipment, and it costs 3 to equip, and you get blown out by a 2-mana removal spell when you do that, and you wasted half your turn, and there's definitely just problems with equipment in the first place. In standard at large. So I don't know if maybe some sort of life gain deck wants to slot this in as a one of. If Aerith Gainsborough turns out to be a deck, then maybe there's already a pretty decent black-white life gain combo package that I'm not necessarily sure needs to incorporate this card. They're a little bit optimized on creatures right now because they mostly want to rely on Raise the Past, and this doesn't really care about Raise the Past at all. So I'm just not convinced that it's great for black-white life gain the way it's currently built, but it might be a nice, contingency plan of some kind, because after a while, you've gotten all these triggers off of Hinterland Sanctifier and Life Creed Duo and all these things. Elissa Core, my fiance, she gives you triggers, life gain triggers, when creatures enter the battlefield. And it's pretty easy to get, 4 of these at least in one turn, depending on how many of these different creatures that you have. So this is getting charge counters pretty fast at a certain sort of point in the game, right? And that means that eventually even a Hinterland Sanctifier, or again, a Life Creed Duo, a flying creature like a Duo, and there's a few flying creatures in that deck, right? Starscape Cleric, whatever, Zoraline. So if you can just throw this on a flyer and suddenly you're getting through for 15 damage or something, and that's not even that much hyperbole. You get through for a lot of damage on just a normal guy with Excalibur II, and even if they blow that guy away, you still got the charge counters on Excalibur. So really, really cool. Do like that it works with Steiner, by the way. Steiner has lifelink, and this is kind of Steiner's big weapon. So cool that they figured that out. That works together. Also, it's a 1-drop equipment to play the turn before you play Steiner on turn 2 to make Steiner a little bit larger. They thought of everything. But either way, man, altogether a really cool equipment, and one of the more playable looking from this set, with the trade-off being that you have to play it in a very specific kind of deck. Venat is next. I don't really have the title in front of me, but this is Venat. This is 2 or 3 mana rather. 1 and 2 white for a legendary elder wizard. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, draw a card. This ability can only trigger once each turn. You can also pay 7 mana, tap her, and exile target permanent. Transform this creature, activate only as a sorcery. And when you transform it, you get Heidelin, the Mother Crystal. This is a legendary god with indestructible. It's a 4/4 and it has Blessing of Light. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. Till your next turn, it gains indestructible. If that creature is legendary, draw a card. Okay, baby. So, yeah, they can just like blow up whatever you're targeting with the ability before it gains the indestructible. But this could snowball if they don't have removal spells. And even if they do have removal spells, you've probably drawn a card or two off of Venat. Either way, because like both sides of the card will draw cards, right? So this is a decent white piece of card draw, and we see more and more of those nowadays, but especially in Commander, I should point that out. It's a format a lot of people like, you know, but especially in Commander. This will at least trigger off your Commander coming into play, but there's plenty of Commanders that want to play with this, like Rydia and Orzhov and other Legendary Matters type stuff. There's, you know, a couple of cards in this set actually that are Legendary Matters, so that could be pretty decent. Obviously in Standard though, we have like Joda, so this will draw cards in your Joda deck. There's again Black-White Legends with Rydia and Delny and Elisil Core and a bunch of really, really good Orzhov Legends. This actually looks like a pretty hype card, potentially not just in Commander, but also in Standard. I think it might have some homes, but obviously those decks are like D+ tier or something right now, so it's going to really have to lift some decks way out of obscurity, but it has the potential. Indestructibility is good, a sort of Luminarch Aspirin ability every turn that again snowballs if the opponent can't find the removal. Pretty decent. And if they find the removal, it's already drawn you cards, so pretty slick little thing here. But we saw 3 more cards this afternoon to kind of tie things up in a bow, or so it would appear, so far today at least. We got Blitzball, 3 mana for an artifact at common. You can tap it for a mana of any color, and it also has, if you'll excuse me, Goal. You can tap it and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. Activate only if an opponent was dealt combat damage by a legendary creature this turn. Kind of sucks that it's combat damage. You know, like there's plenty of Commanders that would have actually maybe played this stinky little rock if it was just any old damage, right? Because there's plenty of Commanders that can do just regular old damage to opponents. There still might be a budget Commander deck or two, literally. I mean, 1 or 2 of them out there that might want to slot this in. Not every single Commander player has forsaken 3 mana rocks, although it is the vast majority of them. You know, 5-6 years ago, this would have been perfectly playable in Commander. Not sure about anymore, but this is really, really good looking, specifically for the pre-release, for the sealed environment. I mean, it might be okay in draft, but that environment should be a little bit faster. Pre-release, though, you're going to be trying to get to all these like big bomb rares and mythics that you got in your pool, and a lot of those are expensive, not just in terms of price, they are, but also in terms of mana value. You know, there's like 9 mana cards in the set. You got to get to them somehow, and I think every deck in pre-release could use a little bit of ramp. And not only that, this helps you play those like 3-color decks that you might be trying to cobble together. There's a lot of good things about a common 3-mana rock in an environment like this. Plus, there's so many legendary creatures. What are there, like 700 legendary creatures in this 300-card set somehow? I don't know how they did that, but they pulled it off. But one way or the other, it shouldn't be too hard to hit with a legendary dude. And then you don't even have to pay any mana. Just tap, sack, draw 2. That's a really good ability. I'm going to give this a 4 1/4. That's not too bad. But Rydia's return over here. Here she is, everybody. We've been waiting on this. We never got Palom and Porum and a host of other creatures, but we are getting Rydia. As a matter of fact, we'll look at the creature version in a second, but Rydia's Return is a sorcery that costs 5 mana, 3 and 2 green. Choose 1. Creatures you control get +3/+3 till end of turn, or return up to 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. I would have really liked this if it were an instant. 2 permanents and instant speed, even at 5 mana, could be, you know, playable in some funky control lists from the past. You know what I mean? There were decks that could have been interested in this at one point in Magic history, but at sorcery speed, I think it kind of kills it. +3/+3 to all your guys is kind of an overrun effect in limited, so I'm not adverse to it, but again, not instant speed, and even though not every overrun effect, including overrun, is instant speed, you know, a lot of them are sorceries, they also give trample, which is usually the best part of an overrun effect in limited for busting through. But that said, you might force some bad blocks or something with this, so it might be playable there. But the best card we've gotten to see today so far, I keep saying that, it's really wishful thinking, is Rydia, Summoner of Mist. A lot of us were waiting on her. 2 mana, red-green Gruul colors for a 1/2 legendary human shaman with Landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. It's also got Summon. X tap. Return target Saga card with mana value X from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Fun fact, that's kind of her mom behind her. Fun fact number 2, though, about this card. I'm going to summon this directly into my Landfall deck, buddy. This kind of churn, for a really efficient cost, only 2 mana, is really, really good in your Landfall deck. And yeah, I'm talking about Commander for the most part here, but I'm also talking about Standard. 2 mana is a pretty efficient cost for this kind of churn. It'll help you find gas when you need it and lands when you need those. I like that it works with any old Saga in Commander. Doesn't even have to be your Commander. You can just have this in the 99 of a Landfall deck or a Saga deck or some weird, kind of hybrid of both of them. This card allows for that, especially if it is your Commander. So there's some cool stuff going on there as far as like how you're going to brew around it in that format. But again, when you actually look at Standard, all of the, relevant Sagas for this ability are in this set. Plus, we do have a lot of other decent Sagas in Standard that you might want to play, but I actually think that this is best when you're only incidentally using its summon ability and you're actually getting the mileage out of the churn ability. But it's especially interesting, at least flavor-wise, that maybe the summon that we've seen so far that this works best with is Titan. That's the first summon that she summons in Final Fantasy IV. It's not the first one in her menu summon box, but it is the first one you actually see her summon in Final Fantasy IV. To protect the village, and she causes the earthquake and blah, blah, blah. So how this works with Titan is really neat, right? You'll be discarding lands into your graveyard when you landfall for Titan to get back on Chapter 2. And if you lose your Titan or you discard your Titan, say to Rydia's own ability, Rydia can recast Titan out of your graveyard and you'll get the Splendid Reclamation ability on Chapter 2 when that rolls around. So any lands that you discarded come back into play. There's a really cool synergy between the two of them. Works with more than just that, if you got Fenrir in your graveyard and get some more ramp out of it. There's just a lot of cool stuff you can do with this. You can even have Fenrir in your hand on turn 3 when you play your land, discard it to this ability, and then use Rydia to just get it out of the graveyard for you. Again, with haste, there's some cool stuff about this that I think that you kind of got to wrap your head around, man. And again, remember that you can use any old Saga, and that really expands the sort of use cases for a card like this. So really liking the way they designed it. I am. I guess in some ways you could say that about the entire set. In a lot of ways, I'm just jacked that some of the cards from this set even exist in the first place because I never thought it would actually happen. But I see a lot of people bummed out about the fact that maybe these cards don't look super powerful. But in my mind, I guess I'm just getting to have my cake and eat it too, right? I get a Final Fantasy set in Magic the Gathering, and that's awesome, but it doesn't look like it's going to invade Standard with non-Magic the Gathering cards, which in the end, I guess, are both things that I wanted. Now, that said, there are some Standard playable cards in this set. I'll stand by that, and we'll talk about those in a video soon, but for the most part, it looks like during design, they favored flavor over, raw power, which is probably how you want to do these sets. I think the design goal here is for Final Fantasy fans to look at these cards, and once they know what they do within the Magic rule set, they're like, oh, it makes sense that it does that because of the thing it does in the game. And honestly, I think they pulled that off a good bit with a lot of these cards. Just again, I think in that sense, they did a good job, and they must be doing something right. Apparently, it's the best-selling Magic the Gathering set of all time before it even ships, and despite the fact that it costs $8,000 in your third-born child, the one you really like, to get a box of these cards. I guess the one thing I'll say about that, because I've had a lot of people asking me to weigh in on the price of this set, is that it's stupid and I hate it. But I guess the second thing I'll say about that is that apparently Wizards is planning already on just printing this set directly into the ground, through the crust and the mantle, all the way to the core. They're going to print this set kind of a lot from what I understand, so eventually singles prices should be either reasonable or actually cheap. Heck, most of the love seems to be going towards all the collector versions of cards and stuff anyway, so if you want a normal version of a card, it will probably get down to a reasonable level, depending on what we're talking about. But, I'm just looking at Papalimo Totolimo from the Commander set and Black Waltz number 3, Hope S Time, which I don't know if that'll hold price or not. There's a few cards I'm looking at right now, but Kuja is $6. That guy's going to be 50 cents before you know it. So all I'm saying is kind of hold the line for a while and you might be able to afford your favorite Final Fantasy stuff before you know it. But that's all speculation. Look, this set means an awful lot to me. I know that Universes Beyond is not a lot of our favorite things, myself included, I'm not super excited about like the Avatar: The Last Airbender set coming up later this year, but I know that a lot of people are. I know a lot of people who are in my personal life, and I don't want to take that away from them. So I'm going to enjoy the Final Fantasy set because it's kind of two of my favorite things of all time. Maybe my two actual favorite things to ever exist mushed together. And I've been fanboying about it pretty hard all preview season, but you guys seem to be enjoying that. It's just kind of one of the most important things in my life, as much as a piece of media or whatever can be. I mean, I still have the Final Fantasy I Nintendo Power Strategy Guide from when I was like 5 years old. There's commentary from 5-year-old Dev written in the margins of this book and like what stuff you should buy and what you shouldn't buy. I played Final Fantasy I and beat it with my dad when I was really young, and then we beat Final Fantasy IV together, and then Final Fantasy VI rolled around, and about halfway through playing that game, my father passed away. We had always bonded a lot over Final Fantasy, and when I finally beat Final Fantasy VI without him there, it still felt like a father-son Kamehameha, right? Like, as Kefka slowly fades away, I can feel my father's spirit behind me. Final Fantasy has always meant an awful lot to me for a lot of different reasons, but the connection to my father was a big one. It's one of the few connections I have with my dad. We play Final Fantasy for an hour or two every night when he got home from work before dinner. So again, there's a lot of memories tied to the series, and not long after he passed away, my buddy Kevin, whose father had also just passed away, oddly enough, I guess we were kind of put there for each other. You know what I mean? Like, we decided we were the only two people who knew what each other were going through. And we started to hang out, and he introduced me to Magic the Gathering. And the first thing I thought was like, oh, this is kind of like Final Fantasy. And the second thing I thought was, man, Dad would really like this game. So I don't know that I would be playing Magic the Gathering, and I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now without the connection to Final Fantasy. So it means a lot to a lot of people, myself included, for various reasons. You know, there are a lot of situations out of which can arise this sort of connection to, I guess if you want to be cynical about it, a media property. That's what it is at the end of the day, but it's also been running in the background of a lot of our lives since we were to 10 years old or less in my case, right? In a lot of your cases too. So allow that to mean something to people. Even though I'm not into, say, the Avatar: The Last Airbender set that's coming out later this year, I know there's going to be people who have that same connection to it that I do, and I respect that. But if you don't want it in your standard, I still understand that 100%. Look, we all have viewpoints, but either way, man, I'm just kind of glad that this happened in the first place, and I got to review all these cards, and I get to play with them really, really soon. I get to build commander decks around them and stuff. And again, I don't want to take that joy away from somebody just because they enjoy a different media property than I do. All I'm saying is this Final Fantasy set's been causing me to get a little bit pensive lately, if you can't tell. I've been thinking about a lot of things on that tip, and guess that's exactly what Wizards wants. Oh my God, am I becoming a shill? I don't think so. I just think that it's okay to let people enjoy things from time to time. Anyway, that's all I've got for preview season, but of course you can check out the full set speed run. We're going to be doing the top 10 sleepers, top 25 cards very, very soon. I'm going to be talking to my buddy Power Dragon about over and underrated cards in the set. So there's a lot more content about Final Fantasy to come in just the next week or two, not to mention deck techs. The patrons have already picked a commander deck to look at. I don't want to tell you who it is just yet, but I may have already said his name in this video. Apart from that, we have got standard decks, believe it or not, that are coming out with Final Fantasy hype cards. So make sure you check out the channel, subscribe to it for more content notifications and such. Like this video, it's the one shaped like a thumb. And of course, if you've liked your experience around here during preview season, you could always check out the Patreon to help support further content like this. But really, I just appreciate you hanging out with me during preview season. Again, there's more content to come. If you want to keep hanging out with me on the couch, that's totally cool. We got a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to Final Fantasy. But anyway, y'all, that's Itzky Lewitzky. I'm donezo for this one, so I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.